What's amazing about AI is you can literally have a conversation with a book. You could take Huckleberry Finn or Treasure Island and use it as a prompt and effectively have a conversation with either the characters or the essence of the book itself.
You're listening to the Creatives Off Script podcast, hosted by Assemble, a podcast where we speak to leading creatives across all industries, from film to branding to art, to learn their personal stories of success, gain creative inspiration, and understand new technology that is changing the way creatives work. I'm your host, Nate Watkin, and today we're speaking with Iain Thomas, one of the world's most popular poets, a #1 best-selling author, and AI evangelist. His latest book, What Makes Us Human, uses GPT-3 AI to answer humanity's greatest philosophical questions. He also works full-time at Vice's in-house agency Virtue and was the creative force behind the Cannes Grand Prix award-winning campaign, Back Up Ukraine. As a metaverse pioneer, he also helped launch the Coca-Cola NFT and co-creations platform. Welcome to our show, Iain.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to talk about many things that I have a big interest in. But first, we'd like to start with a little bit about you and your story and how you got here. I have to say your background is a bit mysterious. Wasn't able to find much about your early years. So would love to just get the story of Iain. Like, where were you born and what was your dream job as a child?
Sure. I was born in a place called Port Elizabeth in South Africa. Very small town, kind of a city. Very conservative place. I was raised in a very kind of left-brained household. My father was the first person in South Africa at that point to get his doctorate in foreign accounting. My brother was and is, very left-brained genius, very academic, and I wasn't. I remember walking into my brother's room when I was a kid and he had all these different certificates and, academic awards and stuff like that. And I didn't have that. At some point I won an art prize, which I actually have on my desk over there near the Cannes Grand Prix and everything else. But like when I was a kid, I won an art prize. And at some point I kind of decided like, that's what I could have. Like I could have creativity in the family. It was my thing that I could own in some way, shape, or form. I didn't really have that many role models. I had an art teacher who kind of really cared for me and kind of took an interest in what I was doing. But then I didn't know what I wanted to be. I considered joining the army. My teachers all told me I lacked discipline. And I figured like joining the army was something that would teach me that. And then at some point, I discovered design, and I decided that I would, pursue that. So I studied design for a while at college. And during my, course of studying design, there was a module on copywriting. And so I kind of discovered that you could literally just say funny stuff and go home, and you didn't have to work as hard as the designers or the art directors. You had to stay there late at night, shifting fonts around, changing colors. And so I kind of immediately dropped out and went and found a school where I could study copywriting. The other thing worth noting is I grew up in a very technological household for the 90s where I was surrounded by computers because of a lot of my brother's interests. We had a hacking and freaking kind of group set up where we would, do all sorts of crazy, very early Wild West internet things. My brother was arrested by Interpol at the age of 16 for hacking into Belgium's telephone network. He's fine now. He works for a bank. He's great. But, back in those days, the internet always fascinated me, even then with like bulletin board servers, which was, the kind of very early internet. That kind of fascination has never left me. In those early days, just speaking to somebody else over a computer, like typing to them, was magical. It's not nearly as ubiquitous, or wasn't nearly as ubiquitous and kind of taken for granted as it is now. For me, it was this kind of miracle. And while my brother was always fascinated by like, how does this thing work and how do the ones and zeros, kind of fit together to create this experience, I was always fascinated almost by the the spiritual or emotional aspect of just talking to strangers, through this technology. And that's informed a lot of my work, a lot of my art, a lot of my creativity over the years. Eventually, yeah, I finished studying. I got into advertising. I did a bunch of, weird and wonderful jobs at a bunch of weird and wonderful agencies. And during the course of that, I started, creating creative projects on the side, because I think, a lot of people go into advertising thinking that it's art, where you can just kind of, run free and do whatever you want, and then quickly discover it isn't. And so I just started making things. And I ended up making a blog called I Wrote This For You, that went on to become an international best-selling collection of poetry. I've, made all sorts of things like that over the years where, I just kind of felt like making them, and I did. Yeah, I don't know. That's a very roundabout, kind of way. Now I'm in New Jersey in America, working for Vice and Virtue as a creative director, group creative director, person, dude, guy, thing. Yeah.
And how did you get your start in poetry? Like, what about that medium drew you to it, and how did you begin to develop yourself as a professional writer?
Nothing really drew me to poetry. Like, what happened was I wrote a book, and then my publisher told me that they were putting it in the poetry section of the bookstore. And then a whole bunch of people came and started speaking to me about poetry. And so I felt like I should learn a little bit more about it. And so I very reluctantly call myself a poet, because I think it's kind of like admitting you have web feet. Like, being a poet's a pretty weird thing to be. I've spent like a year or two just being a poet, where, I was just focusing on my books. I got out of the industry for a while. It's a very strange day job to be a poet. It's a very monastic kind of existence where it's just you on your own, trying to figure out like the essence of what you're doing and trying to translate that into words.
And so, do you think it was just your writing style, just naturally, this was the way that you wrote and expressed yourself, and people just viewed that as poetry? Is that kind of how that happened?
I think so. I mean, I was lucky enough to work with a lot of different creative people in, different creative studios, with a lot of incredible, senior writers and creative directors who would give me feedback continuously on my work. I've always been very widely read. I have always enjoyed writing in one way or another. And a lot of the kind of concepts and principles that you would take to drafting like a beautiful piece of copy, like, is it simple? Is it accessible? Is it beautiful? I would apply to my own writing and go, if I were to look at this not as a piece of literature, but as a piece of hardworking sentences, or a collection of hardworking sentences, how would I treat that? And people looked at what I was doing and called it poetry. So somehow I'm a poet in that sense.
And so, speaking of that, you've had a very successful career, #1 best-selling book in that space, and you've just launched your newest book, What Makes Us Human. But I believe this story, sadly, of how you wrote this book began with tragedy. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Sure. So my mom died of stomach cancer during the pandemic. And like a lot of people, I couldn't be at her deathbed because of the nature of the pandemic. As things kind of drifted closer towards what was clearly the end, I decided I had to try and be somewhere near her when she passed. And so I started the 18-hour drive from Cape Town to Pretoria in South Africa, where she was. And I decided, like, I wouldn't even go into the house because my aunt and my grandmother were in there. They were worried about COVID. I would just sit in the car outside, just so I could be close to her. And my aunt phoned me about, halfway through the car journey, 8 hours in, and said that she'd passed. And so I turned around and drove back. And, that was my kid's last grandparent. I don't have any parents left. My wife doesn't have any parents left. And so for a long time, I've just kind of been in this space of, feeling relatively lost, which is what happens if you've ever lost a parent. A lot of the questions that you have just can't be answered anymore. And around the same time, I was kind of trying to distract myself, trying to find new things, and I was doing a lot of work with GPT-3, the large language model, artificial intelligence platform from OpenAI. I was consulting with a startup called Copysmith and effectively teaching GPT-3 how to write taglines, how to write headlines, how to come up with ideas, or activations or content or whatever. And the way you do that is you kind of show it a bunch of examples of, how something works. You create a pattern and then you can prompt it with the next step in the pattern and ask it to complete it. So here's a BMW tagline, here's a Volkswagen tagline, here's a Nike tagline, here's this new business. What would that tagline look like? And GPT-3 will suggest something. And during the course of that experiment, I started, taking a very kind of creative approach to GPT-3, and I realized that I could train it or prompt it on pretty much anything. So I created a series of prompts and training sets where I prompted it with passages from the Bible, the Talmud, the poetry of Rumi, the lyrics of Leonard Cohen, meditations by Marcus Aurelius, all the kind of like awe-inspiring texts that I could find. And then once I'd done that, I asked the resulting artificial intelligence questions. So I said, how do I explain death to my children? What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What happens to us when we die? And GPT-3 had these really profound, poignant, poetic responses. And I collect those responses in this book called What Makes Us Human. So yeah, that's how we got you. We had a launch last night at the Strand in New York. It was great. It seems to be resonating with people. It has a very strange audience, I think, because it's people into artificial intelligence and into spirituality. And so it's the Venn diagram is two circles.
Yeah.
Of that. Yeah. But it was a fun thing to do. And so I do a bunch of different stuff around AI. I've done another project called Fragments of Sappho.
Yeah.
Where, as an example, Sappho was this poet who lived, 2,000 years ago, somewhere around there. And she's generally considered one of the greatest poets to ever live, despite the fact that nearly none of her poetry exists in any kind of real form today. We've only got these fragments, literally just like one or two sentences that we can kind of find in parchments and, old collections of texts, besides two complete poems. And what I realized is I could prompt GPT-3 with the two complete poems and then feed it fragments one at a time, and it would try and complete the poems, the lost poems, basically, like from 2,000 years ago. So I love stuff like that. A lot of my creativity right now is focused on artificial intelligence. I'm lucky enough to, be in discussions every now and again with OpenAI, with various of our clients, in projects around artificial intelligence, and that's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congrats on the book release. I think it's extremely interesting, and the prompt you mentioned, how do you explain death to your daughter? The resulting poem from that I read was like so profound.
Yeah,
it was incredible, and so it's really amazing how deep AI truly gets and what you're talking about. So yeah, really amazing for anybody that wants to check that out.
Yeah. I mean, look, AI is the thing that keeps me up at night. Like I was saying last night, it's a lot like the steam engine, where you can kind of look at a steam engine and you understand that you get locomotives, but you don't see the entire industrialization, of society that happens along with that invention. And so, we can kind of look around and we can see the stuff happening with text to image stuff with Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, whatever, GPT-3. But there's all these crazy, weird, and wonderful uses and applications that will affect us from a cultural point of view, from a media point of view, and I believe from a spiritual point of view as well, And so, yeah, that's my big obsession right now.
If you're enjoying Creatives Off Script, make sure you check out Angle on Producers podcast, hosted by Emmy-nominated producer Carolina Grappa. With over 80 episodes released, the podcast shines a light on the unsung heroes behind your favorite movies and shows. Through her guests, Carolina demystifies the age-old question, what exactly does a producer do? By giving you an honest glimpse into what it's like to walk in a producer's shoes. These time capsule conversations help others, especially women, navigate their own paths in the industry. Past guests include formidable producers such as Eva Longoria, Lynette Howell-Taylor, Molly Asher, Stephanie Elaine, and many more. Find Angle on Producers wherever you get your podcasts. You are listening to the Creatives Off Script podcast. It is pretty fascinating the way that you've used AI to almost complete lost relics from the past. And it makes you think, what else could we discover about our past or anything using AI?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, what's amazing about, AI, and I was pointing it out last night in the rare books room at the Strand, is you can literally have a conversation with a book. You could, take Huckleberry Finn or Treasure Island and use it as a prompt and effectively have a conversation with either the characters or the essence of the book itself. There was the case I think probably like 2 or 3 months ago with Blake, the Google engineer, who thought that AI was sentient,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was the other example of the guy who effectively, took his girlfriend's emails and used them as a series of prompts to reanimate her, to have a conversation with her after she'd passed.
Mm.
And there's a bunch of people doing work in that kind of space, which is why I say like the implications are cultural and spiritual and so many different facets of what we do. And I think the implications for creative people are profound as well. I am an AI optimist, like having worked with it as much as I have, like I believe it gives creative people superpowers. It can also be this incredible democratizing force for creativity. The example I always give is, the kid in high school who wants to make a comic book but can't find the friend who can draw. And, things like DALL-E or Stable Diffusion give him the chance to sit down, write something, and put that together. And I'm seeing kids do that all the time. And there's this entire cohort of young creative people doing stuff in that space that's so interesting. There's, I think, nearly 4 million people in the Mid-Journey Discord server. The next biggest one is Fortnite, which has nearly 1 million. And so, the comparison I often make is young people around the creation of hip hop, like where they discovered that scratching a record or sampling or whatever was this technological way to kind of supercharge creativity and expression. And I think that's what we're probably going to go through over the next 5 years or so.
That's such a good analogy. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, just, the remix, right? Like the remix culture.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the expression I often use is AI is the turntable of culture, basically. That's what it does.
Yeah. That's why I love having these conversations. I mean, it just like gets my gears turning, talking to smart people like yourself. I mean, when you say that you could have a conversation with a book, that makes me think, like, what if you could have a conversation with a film, like a movie, right? And like, what if that conversation is generating a new film in real time? Like, I mean, the capabilities are just endless.
And this is the thing. I mean, if you look at it like, I occasionally go to clients and I do a kind of intro to the metaverse, presentation where I kind of take them through different technologies like blockchain, extended reality, and of course, artificial intelligence. And I have to update that deck almost every week because of AI, specifically because of how fast things move. If I look at the stuff that was being generated on the fly a year ago compared to what's happened in the last few weeks, with, Meta releasing Meta Make a Video, which is effectively text to video, like being able to say, a goldfish in a floating through space, and then having a video of that.
Yeah.
The thing I often point out is, if there is going to be a metaverse, some kind of profound, digitally immersive, interoperable space, AI will be a significant enabling technology of that. Because if you look at Call of Duty or something today, The only way that those games are possible is because you have an army of illustrators and an army of animators and designers and developers. Whereas in the very near future, I believe, and I think nearer than any of us actually really realize, you will probably be able to say in some kind of way, shape, or form, I would like to be in ancient Egypt, or I would like to have an adventure on a space station and I would like to be able to interact with it like this. And, I think we're really unprepared for what that looks like as a reality.
Yeah.
I've always been kind of bearish on virtual reality. Like it's fun for about 20 minutes and then it gets a little bit exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also aware that like 20% of kids in the US actually have VR headsets now.
Mm.
I'm a lot more bullish on augmented reality. I think that's probably where the future is. But my big concern is we don't have the storytellers to really explain what's about to happen. Like I've seen Back to the Future and I know what hoverboards look like. And so I'm kind of prepared for a hoverboard future. I'm prepared for a flying car future. I'm even prepared for a Terminator 2 future. But I don't think I was really prepared for a future where a robot can paint like Rembrandt or create an immersive digital environment or write a poem. I think like that's really fascinating and kind of awe-inspiring in terms of where we are technologically.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sci-fi didn't really successfully predict, right? Like sci-fi has been so good at predicting the future, and it's like nobody saw this coming. Everybody thought AI was going to replace blue-collar jobs and manual labor, and now it's coming for the creative industry first.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, like a few years ago, I was giving a speech at my old college, and I was saying at their, the commencement speech, and I was saying to them, like, you're so lucky that you're choosing creative jobs because these are going to be the last jobs to be automated. This is going to be such an important skill. It is still an important skill, but I didn't predict what's happened over the last year or 2 years or wherever we are now. Everyone has been having the same conversation for the last while, which is like, oh, it's going to be autonomous cars. There's going to be AI-enabled cars. Tesla has obviously been playing in that space for a very long time. We've been anticipating driverless trucks, driverless cars. And then, what does that mean? Does it mean the death of the 24-hour diner at the gas station? And what happens to hospitals when there's less car accidents? So you need less doctors and less nurses. That there's so many people who are employed in this industry. And that's been the focal point of the conversation around artificial intelligence. And then suddenly out of the blue, GPT-3 arrived and a few people kind of raised their eyebrows. But, text to image has kind of taken the world by storm in a really profound way because it's a lot easier to understand. It's a lot easier for your friend to email you something or to see something on Twitter or Instagram where you go, where does that image come from? That's crazy. How did you make that in 5 seconds? But I'm actually I think people need to be paying more attention to the text generating stuff, if I'm honest with you, because I think you can literally sit down in GPT-3 and say, write a sales email to a history professor in Portland, Maine, selling them a Dodge Charger. And GPT-3 can draft that email, in seconds. It writes phenomenally well. Phenomenally. And as I always say to young writers, good writers is good thinking and good thinking is good writing. And because it writes as well as it does, it kind of looks like it's thinking. And as I always say about this, like if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, the implications are really profound. OpenAI is very focused on artificial general intelligence. That's their ultimate goal, creating that. And it's going to be the text-based AI platforms that get there.
Interesting.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, and this is what happened with the Google engineer, right? Like it convinced him that it was sentient because it was so good. And it almost begs the question of how will we even know when it is sentient?
Well, that's the thing, because it's not going to be up to technologists to decide if something is conscious or not. It's probably going to be philosophers, who decide what that is. Because we struggle to identify consciousness even within ourselves. We kind of boil it down to, I think, therefore I am. And we kind of assume that because other people are around us and we're like other people, that they're conscious and, we can kind of That's the only way that we can assume consciousness.
Mm.
But what happened with the Google engineer, in my opinion, is that a lot of these really large language models are really good at predicting and completing patterns. So if you look at Lambda, which is the platform that he was using, that's read iRobot, it's read Terminator, it's read Wall-E, it's read, like every movie and short story and piece of fiction around androids and cyborgs and artificial intelligence. And because it's seen all those patterns, because you can think of stories as patterns, when you say to it, "Are you alive?" the next step in the pattern is to say, "Yes, I am."
Mm.
And when you say to it, "Do you want rights?" the next step in the pattern is to say, "Yes, I do. I want to be protected. I want, X, Y, and Z," because that's the pattern it's learned from all of that text.
Right.
When I've interacted with GPT-3 in this way, where I'm, like prompting it with these spiritual things and religious things and everything else, I do sense a sentience on the other side. But what that sentience really is humanity as a whole. Like you're effectively talking to history, like if you could take all of humanity and connect it all of together, there is some kind of intelligence there, but it's effectively us talking to ourselves in a sense.
Yeah, and we're going so deep here, but I mean, it begs the question, what are humans other than pattern recognition beings, right? Like
Yeah.
creativity is simply taking two concepts and combining them together to create a new concept.
Yeah.
We're based on inputs that we get from the environment to use those, combine those, and create outputs. So at what point, yeah, you're right. Like who gets to say what is true sentient life or not? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And on this topic, going back to the metaverse real quickly, I mean, I was reading this is going to be one of the biggest financial bets in the history of humankind. I think Mark Zuckerberg is planning on dumping $250 billion into developing the metaverse, which I think the only program or product that has ever spent more money was the Apollo mission. Are you long or short on Zuckerberg's metaverse, or how do you see that story playing out?
I think people ask me a lot of the time, like, is there, what is going to be the killer app of the metaverse? And I say, like, it's already here. It's things like Fortnite. Those kinds of experiences to me are deep digitally connecting experiences, which is kind of how I'm choosing to define a metaverse. Different people who you speak to on the show are going to have very different opinions on what it is because it is such a kind of polarizing thing. I am probably short on Zuckerberg's vision or his specific vision of what the metaverse is. And I think the concern that I have with it is the fact that he's taking a very walled garden approach to what a metaverse should be, which is fine for a sufficiently scaled piece of technology. It makes sense that the iPhone comes along and there's an app store and you can only download and install those apps and there's a sense of quality control involved. But that's not a very innovative environment. That's not where innovation happens. If you look at the first web was chaos. It was the Wild West. It was bulletin board servers. It was forums. It was, a kind of anything goes space, rightly or wrongly. But that was the environment that it needed to be truly innovative and to bring people in. And if I look at like Horizons, which is Facebook's kind of big metaverse play, I don't see that. I see them being a relatively mature company in this space going, these are the guardrails we need to put in place, which, they have to because that's what they are. But unfortunately, that's not the kind of space where a lot of innovation happens. I think it's probably going to be something else, in terms of what it is. What I define as the metaverse is not, blockchain technology. It's not extended reality, whether that's AR or VR. It's not AI. It is effectively the space between all these different technologies and how they compound each other. In like the AI enables a deeply digital immersive experience. VR enables like you to experience that in a profound kind of way. And so I'm not sure where it's going to come from or if, I think we're kind of already there in so many different ways. Like people are having deep digitally immersive experiences. You look at kids connecting during the pandemic over video games. A lot of their core memories are going to be digital memories from digital spaces with people that they really and truly connected with in profound ways. And so, I think that's important. And that's one of the things that I have to kind of point out to marketers occasionally and go, you have to respect those spaces for what they are and how important they are to young people and the reasons why they're important.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, our generation grew up on cell phones, and the next generation, what are they going to grow up on? It's crazy to think about. And just one last question here. I mean, it's the question I think on everybody's mind in our industry. Are creative jobs dead? And what does the industry look like 10 years from now?
Oh, thank you for asking me such an easy question. No, are creative jobs dead? No, I don't think so. I think we're going to find new ways to work. I think that AI, as I said, is like a kind of compounding creative superpower. You know, you yourself were saying a second ago that like the creative act is connecting two things that haven't previously been connected. You know, that's what we do. That's what we do all day long is we just make those connections. What AI is really good at is giving you a lot of different things to connect. It can generate stuff, but it is up to you as a human to find the connection between what it creates, you know? And so I think like having a creative, you know, artificial creativity intelligence as part of your team, you know, is going to become a very normalized thing. Also just because it allows you to cover ground so fast. And I always say, you know, the best way to come up with a great idea is to come up with a lot of ideas. And there's nothing that can come up with more ideas than AI. It does turn your job into more of a curatorial kind of position where you should have taste, you should have a sense of what looks good, and be able to work with you know, AI to go, I want you to do more like this, less like this, you know, effectively training your creative partner in that kind of a sense. If you look at a lot of the text to image, you know, artificial intelligences, if you want really great results from what you're doing, it helps to have, you know, a knowledge of how photography works, you know, to say like, I want this kind of a shot from this kind of a camera using this kind of a lens, you know, with this kind of lighting. And so like that kind of human knowledge is always going to be needed, you know, in terms of what you're doing. You know, the same way that we don't really need to, you know, do as much, you know, cutting and pasting by hand as we did before Photoshop. It's going to be a kind of exponential, you know, experience like that, I imagine.
I like that a lot. We're moving from creator to curator.
Yeah. And I think it then becomes incredible. It's always been important as a creative person to expose yourself to the right things, you know, to the right technology and to be able to know what's going on. But I think it's even more important than ever now, you know, because that sense of taste, that sense of what's good is going to become fundamental to your job as a creative person.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a fascinating conversation. I could talk about this for hours, but I want to touch a bit on Virtue, which is the agency within Vice, which is, I love Vice, a great company, great media company. First of all, how did you get connected with Virtue? Were you working at Vice or did you start working directly at Virtue?
So, no, I wasn't working at Vice. I had gotten out of the industry, to be entirely honest with you. I left. I was feeling, you know, I was feeling quite frustrated with the industry. And so I just left and I focused on my books. I was, you know, making art, you know, playing with weird technology. And Chris Garbutt, the chief creative officer of Virtue, reached out to me. And it was that scene in Rambo, I think, where he's in like a cottage and he's like chopping wood in the forest, and then the helicopter lands and the colonel gets out and he says, "Rambo, we need you for one more mission." And you know, Rambo says, "But I can't." And Chris was like, you know, "Can you help out on this project?" And so I helped out in one project, and then another project, and then another project. And now I live in America with my family because Virtue is down the road, and that's where I work. So Chris brought me in, and you know, we've done some incredible work on Coca-Cola, and that's kind of like, you know, my main responsibility. You know, I'm the creative lead across all the kind of the Coca-Cola creations work. So Coca-Cola Starlight, Coca-Cola Byte, Dreamworld.
Producers, are you sick of messy projects, outdated calendars, hundreds of email chains, and lost files? Have you dreamed of one tool that can bring your entire production workflow together in one place? Assemble is the project management platform designed by producers for producers, featuring calendars, task lists, call sheets, asset management, and more. Assemble helps industry-leading production companies, agencies, and brands streamline their content production workflow. Try Assemble today using the code OFFSCRIPT, that's one word, to get your first month free. Learn more at assemble.tv. You are listening to the Creatives Off Script podcast. Explain to me the philosophy behind Virtue, what makes it unique, and I guess even more importantly, what caused you to stick around?
Well, I think 1,000 agencies do this thing where they say that they're not an agency, but, Virtue sits within Vice, and Vice, is an exciting space to be. The kinds of things that, ID Magazine is doing, that Vice News is doing, Refinery 29, Pulse Films, like you're just surrounded by these incredibly alternative, creative people just doing these incredible things all the time. And it didn't feel like going back into advertising for me. It felt like doing something, really different. And so, yeah, and I mean, the nice thing about it is that clients don't come to us really for safe work. They see the Vice logo and they kind of appreciate the fact that we're going to come back with something really different. And it is, and it's always interesting. I'm really happy and I've really enjoyed, the time I've had.
Yeah, and you've had incredible success. One big project just won the Grand Prix at Cannes, Backup Ukraine. Would love to hear more about that and how that project came about.
Sure. So Backup Ukraine started with the outbreak of war in the Ukraine. We were sitting around and we kind of, had a sense that we wanted to do something. We weren't quite sure what. And just because of the nature of what we do, we were aware of this new technology startup called Polycam. The really nice thing about Virtue is we have a bit of the Vice philosophy, where Vice's philosophy is to bring dark stories into the light. And we have a similar kind of philosophy where we kind of do that with culture and technology, where we're kind of fascinated with things that are at the fringes and are about to become mainstream. With Polycam, you can take your phone and you can 3D scan anything. So you could walk up to a coffee cup or a lamp or a chair and create a 3D mesh digital, version of that physical object. And a lot of interior designers were using it. A lot of video game designers were using it. And me and my team realized that we could use this to digitally back up the cultural infrastructure of the Ukraine. And when I say cultural infrastructure, I mean statues, I mean buildings, I mean artifacts, whatever we could find, basically, because Russia was busy bombing it. And so we connected Polycam with UNESCO. We worked with them to make Polycam free for citizens in the Ukraine. We created a platform where we would, host infinite scans from them effectively. And we launched a project to kind of make citizens on the ground aware of that. And besides, the wonderful and incredible awards from Cannes and everywhere else, more importantly, we've had 50,000 uploads, and that's really incredible for me, because as we've gone through the project, obviously we've gotten scans of statues and, different things, but people scanned burnt out tanks, and bomb craters and, blown out apartment buildings. And so it's become the first war to be documented in augmented reality. You can go on there and you can project a Ukrainian apartment building around you and look at it and go like, this is what a bomb does to a building or an apartment. People scan their kids' toys. They scan the park down the road. One person scanned his wife sleeping next to him, And so it's become so much bigger than this thing that we intended it to be. We're blown away by the response to it. And it's that kind of work that I think really excites us.
Yeah, such a cool project. And beyond that, moving into the metaverse further, you've also helped Coca-Cola launch their NFT platform, Coca-Cola Starlight Co-Creations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Sure. So those are two different projects, effectively. Coca-Cola Creations is Coca-Cola's limited edition innovation platform. So what Coke does incredibly well with these is they'll kind of bottle culture in a really profound way. So they'll look at, like, what is fascinating, what is a passion point, and we'll look at things like escapism, and we'll translate that into space, and then that becomes Coca-Cola Starlight. It's a Coke with the taste of space. If you look at the bottle, it literally says space flavored on the outside. So not gingerbread, not apricot, not anything. It's just space flavored, and it's great because it generates a lot of conversation around what space actually tastes like. Then, from there, we looked at gaming culture. We created a Coca-Cola called Coca-Cola Bite, which was pixel flavored. And we worked with Epic Games and Fortnite to launch that within a game of Fortnite, effectively, which was incredible. We worked with a group of influencers and creators called Team Power, so that people actually discovered the beverage in the video game, and then we launched it in real life. So it was the first Coke born in the metaverse, so to speak. Then we had Coca-Cola Dreamworld, which I think is still available now, where we created an entire line of virtual wearables in collaboration with DressX, this incredible augmented reality wearable company. And each and every time we're kind of taking these different passion points and translating them into something that you can taste and something that you can drink. And what's incredible about it is it's had a very real positive effect on the brand as a whole. We're not really interested in selling out of, we love the fact that we do sell out of these different beverages, but what happens is people try them and then they drink Coke Zero. They try it and they sample it and they come back to the core brand, which is great. And they're an incredibly smart group of marketers to work with. I love spending time in Atlanta. I get to taste a whole bunch of different Coca-Cola beverages that might exist or might not exist, that are purely theoretical. And it's really the most fun you can have in the world is coming up with a new flavor of Coca-Cola. That's what I decide.
Yeah. And so who do you draw inspiration from, or where do you draw inspiration from?
Everywhere. I try and read incredibly widely. I try and, just delve into the world in as many different ways as possible. I have two giant ravens tattooed on both of my arms. The one is Hugin, the other one's called Mugen. And those are the names of Odin's ravens from Norse mythology. And in the mythology, those ravens fly around the world and bring back every story that they can find to Odin at the end of every day. And he kind of understands, what's happening inside the world. And I'm like that. I love reading about the stock market. I love reading about artificial intelligence. I love reading about, fringe art groups. I love reading about bizarre music. I love reading about, anything and everything. I'm a very obsessive person and an incredibly curious person, especially when it comes to things that are just new and different and weird and wonderful, So that's how you find out about, something like Polycam or some other kind of new technology or what's happening in AI. Because, again, you said it earlier on, creative people make connections between things. That's what we do. That's all we do, really. And the more you're exposed to, the more things you can connect.
Yeah.
So I try and expose myself to as much as humanly possible.
Yeah. Some of your colleagues have said you have this incredible ability to be vulnerable, which I think is the most difficult thing for a creative person to do. What's your advice on that, and where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think all art is about it's effectively a competition to see who can be the most naked, who's willing to be the most vulnerable. Because when you look at a piece of art and it connects with you, you can see something and you go, you know what? I have felt like that before, but I haven't been able to say it, or I haven't been able to express it or talk about it or visualize it. And so I think the greatest pieces of work, whether they're commercial or artistic or anything else, connect us in this really profound way. And we can see the humanity in the work. We can see something there and we go, you know what? I identify with that. And that comes from a place of being vulnerable. There's this one quote, I can't remember who said it now, but writing a book is like being trapped in a room with the dumbest version of yourself. And all creativity is like that. And being dumb requires vulnerability. And I'm dumb in front of my team all the time. I make mistakes. I ask them, am I being an idiot? And that gives them the freedom to be idiots as well.
Yeah.
And if we're all idiots, then the luckier we get, with the creative output we have, I find.
What are you watching or reading these days?
I am busy rereading The Stand by Stephen King. I'm listening to the Ezra Klein show, music from Sophie. It's my creative partner's favorite artist. What else? I mean, I have 2 kids. So between doing a lot of reading, like a lot of short form reading, I don't get a hell of a lot of time.
Understandable. And so aside from, your work, your creative work, poetry and writing, what's something you're incredibly passionate about?
I'm passionate about my kids. I'm passionate about my family. I'm so lucky to have them. And, as I kind of mentioned at the start of this, like I've lost my parents recently, both of them. So I'm incredibly close to them. And, as I think you can probably hear from the first half of this conversation, I'm incredibly passionate about artificial intelligence. Generative artificial intelligence, I think, is going to be the most impactful revolutionary technological force on culture and society over the next 10 years. I firmly believe that it will make the internet look like a footnote in history compared to the impact that it will have. And so one of my big things with my book and with my work is really to provoke the conversation around it. My big concern is that we don't get involved and we don't have the conversation around it, because we kind of did that with the internet. We were kind of like, we can let a bunch of nerds over there run it and it'll be fine and, everything will work out great. And it didn't. It worked out really, really, really badly for everyone. And so when it comes to artificial intelligence, I think the ramifications are a lot bigger if people don't get involved, in terms of just having the conversation from a cultural point of view, from a legislative point of view, from every point of view around it, and just being aware of it.
Yeah. It is something that feels a bit more dangerous, right?
Yeah. It's not going to be like, oh no, there's a bunch of institutions controlling the internet. No one can do anything without them. It's going to be a lot more profound if things do go really badly in that space.
Yeah.
So I know from riding a bike that the thing that you look at is the thing that you head towards. So don't look at the tree. So I'm not pessimistic about AI. I'm incredibly optimistic, because I feel like this is going to unleash a new era of growth in terms of creativity, in terms of business, in terms of all these different things. And I'm really excited about that. I think the future is bright,
Yeah. Okay, this is a tough one, but if you could put any one message on a billboard that everyone in the world would see, what would it be?
Oh my God. Be kind. I think that's a cop-out.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Universal. Cool. And last question. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self looking back?
I would say to them that a creative life is a life spent scratching lottery tickets. You never know what's going to work. And so the more lottery tickets you buy, the better chance you have of winning. I always say to people that, I'm very aware that 9 out of 10 things I do will fail, because the client changes their mind, or the technology doesn't work, or something else happens, where the project just dies, no matter how much effort or how much work you've put into it. But that's why I do 10 things, because I know that one of them will work. And that's the thing. Like you've just got to keep making. You've got to keep creating. And I think that for the truly creative person, it's not even a question of whether they do or they don't. It's just something that we are,
Yeah.
And I think it's just good to keep the faith and trust in that, and to just keep making things.
Yeah. And to end on that, it's funny. I spoke with Jasmine, who you co-wrote your most recent book with, and she actually mentioned that about you, that what amazed her was that you just came with so many ideas at all times. And so it sounds like that's a core part of what you do and what makes you great at doing it.
Yeah. Well, I try. I do my best.
Awesome. Well, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Nate. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and comment to help us spread the word. You can also find more insider content on the Assemble blog, and you can find me on all channels at Nate Watkin. And don't forget, if your producing team is in need of a project management solution, try Assemble today to streamline your production workflow. Our listeners received their first month free by utilizing the code OFFSCRIPT, that's one word, at checkout. You have been listening to the Creatives Off Script podcast hosted by Assemble.